Hello, YouTube friends. Jamie Hepworth here. Today, I wanted to take some time to talk with you about homeschooling. I am seeing all over my Facebook feed lots of people asking the question that I am always asked as a homeschooler from other newbie homeschoolers. What curriculum should I buy? How should I go about educating my children? They are really excited, and maybe this is you, right? You're the newbie, and I'm talking to you. You're excited, you're starting this new adventure, or maybe after the COVID situation, you're like, okay, I want to do this. I want to see if I can get into this a little bit more. A lot of people are thinking about homeschooling. It is the fastest growing approach to education, and for really good reason, because it works. And you don't have to have a teaching certification to be successful. You just need to love your kids and be passionate about learning, and also cultivate an environment in your home where your children are doing more of the work than you are. But how do you do that in an inspiring and loving way? Well, there's lots of things that you can do. There's materials that you can choose that are especially enticing and beautiful. You can limit access to materials and practices that will distract them from learning. There's lots of ways to cultivate a wonderful homeschooling environment. But I thought what I would talk about today is the big picture of homeschooling and why we do it. Especially, this is for people who are of the LDS persuasion. This is from my perspective as a homeschooling mother of 5. My kids are 3 to 12. And a lot of times people want to talk about the academic subjects and how to talk about those. And this presentation is totally going to cover those. I have lots of resources to share with you, so please bear with me as I talk about this big picture idea. But I think we don't have enough conversation happening about the end. Like, what are the ends of an education? What is the whole point? What is the purpose? And as I was contemplating that this morning, about what are the ends of each subject that we study and what are the ends of being an educated person, I'm kind of reminded of C.S. Lewis and some of the things that he said. As you know, he was a prolific writer and thinker and an apologist for Christianity, and I love C.S. Lewis. And he talked about in The Great Divorce this idea of kind of going up the mountain. And are you willing to go up this mountain when other people are just kind of hanging out in the grass to know God for yourself? And I remember in one of his essays that he wrote, he talked about the classics, and does classic literature serve a purpose? And he said something along the lines of that it could be helpful, but if it didn't help you come closer to God, then it really didn't matter. And he actually kind of tossed all of that to the side and said, it doesn't matter. It's just about your relationship with God. And it was interesting to see how he was so quick to just toss everything that he loved and invested in to the side. And it was like, the true purpose is to know God. So I hope we can think about that. As I was preparing for this presentation, this is actually my 3rd time recording it. And this morning I was asking God, what else do I need to include? And I had the thought to study Doctrine and Covenants, section 38. So I studied that this morning, and I've included some of those scriptures here. The entire section is helpful, especially putting things in the context of the end of the world and what has been prophesied to happen and where we're going. And I think it's also extremely relevant in the context of talking about how do we educate our children? What is the point? Maybe our kids could be wonderful, brilliant readers of classic literature and know all of the best ideas in the world. But if they don't know Jesus, it probably doesn't matter. In fact, I would say it definitely doesn't. It doesn't matter. Because Jesus is the one who created the world, and he did it under the direction of God the Father. And he is able to know all things. All things are present before him. Like, to know Jesus is to know the truth. And to become like Jesus is to know all things and have all the things present before our eyes, right? And Jesus has Zion of Enoch into his own bosom. He took Zion into his own bosom. And some of the prophecies of these last days are that the city of Enoch will return and we will be reunited and we will have Zion on this earth again. It has happened once before and it's going to happen again. There's going to be a return of Zion on the earth. And that is the goal of an education right there, so that we can be united with each other in Christ, not in some made up universal world religion that's taken out of the context of truth. Like Jesus is the truth. He is the truth and the way and the light and the life. Okay. It's also for us to have the veil rent, to know who Jesus is, and to recognize that not only is he in our midst, but to be able to see him for ourselves, to know him for ourselves, and to be purified in order to be able to have our relationship with Christ to be completely sure and completely based in knowledge, not only faith. An education is supposed to help prepare us for that day of meeting with Christ and for the things that have been prophesied to come. And God wants to bless us with a land of promise, a land flowing with milk and honey, not really riches in the same sense that the world talks about riches, but in our relationships with God and each other, so that curses can be lifted, right? Veils of unbelief can be lifted. God wants to give us a land for inheritance. And it's not so much about physical land, although that is a covenant promise that we'll have somewhere to live that will be protected. But I think the true protection comes from our relationships with God and with each other and with our families. Talks about we can have an inheritance of our children forever. How do you win your children's hearts? And how do you keep them forever? Well, you help them know who Jesus is. That's how you do that. And when Jesus is our king and he's the one watching over us, we are able to be participants in the kingdom of God. We receive everything that Christ does because he is the true husbandman. He is the one who has paid the price for all things. And so if we take his name upon us and we learn his ways and we receive his gospel into our hearts and we teach our children to do the same thing, then we are connected to the one who has authorization to give us access to everything forever. And God's purposes are to make us a free people and for us to have no laws, but God's laws, because Jesus is our lawgiver, right? In fulfilling the atonement, Jesus met us wherever we are at. And so he has created a path for each of us to come back, and with his grace supporting us every single step of the way to be transformed and to be like him. And so when we recognize that, the things that we're instructed to do by God, we can trust those more deeply. And I think that's going to be more and more important. President Nelson talked about how we need to hear him, right? We need to know the voice of God in our lives. And I think that is absolutely vital. Like, do your kids know how God communicates with them? Do you know how God communicates with you? There's nothing more important to figure out right now. And he talks about in Doctrine and Covenants 38 that we should teach each other according to the office we've been appointed. If you are a parent of children, you are appointed unto an office to teach your children the truth. That is your office. That is your stewardship. That is not something that we can farm out to others without consequences. I'm reminded of the family proclamation where it says, it talks about, how we're supposed to take care of our children. It talks about husbands and wives having a solemn responsibility to love and care for each other and for their children. It says that children are an heritage of the Lord. Parents have a sacred duty to rear their children in love and righteousness, to provide for their physical and spiritual needs, and to teach them to love and serve one another, observing the commandments of God, and to be law-abiding citizens wherever they live. And this is the part that I think is important here that I'm trying to emphasize. Husbands and wives, mothers and fathers will be held accountable before God for the discharge of these obligations. And I think we're very quick to discharge the obligation that we have to be the ones to teach our children. I think we should be very careful about who we allow to be the teachers of our children, because they may not have the same values that we do. And that's why I'm so passionate about homeschooling. There's nobody else who has the office or stewardship to teach your children in the way that you do. And so I would invite you to prayerfully consider that idea, that this is a sacred obligation that you have. And it talks about how those who fail to fulfill family responsibilities will one day stand accountable before God. Further, we warn that the disintegration of the family will bring upon individuals, communities, and nations the calamities foretold by ancient and modern prophets. We're right there. It does say also in this document that mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. Most of the people who follow my channel are women. And so this is really about, how do you be a mom who nurtures your kids to bring them to Christ? That's what this is really about. But I just thought that those were some important words to share. I've got a few more points here. We need to learn how to esteem our brothers and sisters as ourselves and practice virtue and holiness before God. We need to care for our little ones, and we need to care for other people. Not everyone has a family situation where they're able to raise their children with as much devotion to, I guess, homeschooling, to use the language of people that I don't generally politically agree with. Homeschooling is a privileged position, but it's also something we can sacrifice for. And I believe that we can become wiser and more intelligent about how we approach this and find ways to help support each other so that there are no poor among us. Let's find ways to help support each other in educating our children in the things that matter most. And I believe God will prepare a way for us to do that, no matter what your circumstance is. Any circumstance, if this matters to you, if you want God to show you how to do it, He can provide a way for you and for your children. Now, I want to just go over the core academic subjects and give you some resources for each one, but I'm also trying to give you a big picture of, like, what's the point of this? Why do we learn these things? And so I put together a few slides that talk about writing and reading and social studies and math and science to show you that big picture of development, because there's a spectrum, right? I'm not only talking about spiritual things, but I'm talking about the academic things today. But I just want you to keep in mind what I just shared with you. The goal is to know Jesus, and the education that we give our children should help to serve that. So how do we learn? Why do we learn? Let's learn about why we write, okay? The goal of writing is really to be articulate thinkers and to be powerful rememberers. If we're able to record things in writing, we're able to speak to other people, and not only people within the context of the present moment, but across time. And so being able to make records that can be understood by people across time is a powerful way to seek to influence and to do good in the world. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. Primarily in my home, we use narration, notebooking, theater, and oral presentations. And and compositions that I'm going to talk about in the context of social studies. That's a big way that I encourage writing. But this really starts with just having your kids on your lap, sitting and reading beautiful books. Find the most beautiful books you possibly can, the most beautiful illustrations and delicious words that really give your kids something to chew on and really think about. I'm not talking about Diary of a Wimpy Kid here, okay? I am talking about reading Charlotte's Web, or find some fairy tales illustrated by Kinyuko Craft. Find beautiful, beautiful books with beautiful words and beautiful images. That is how you entice a child to want to care about words. And As a child learns to sit and listen, then they start to get interested in owning the words for themselves. You can encourage your children to memorize beautiful words and scriptures by having a family scripture of the week on your fridge, or short sentences that we practice repeating again and again, stuff like that. Help your children to start to memorize beautiful words. They may also start getting interested in copywriting. Copywriting is just doing your best to write down the words as you see them on the page. There's definitely a process leading up to that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but articulate thinking also begins with narration. When you read a story to your children, you can turn it around on them and say, "Oh, your turn, you tell me the story." And you let your child tell you what they heard. Or you can have, if you're reading a classic out loud to your kids, you've got a chapter you've read, you're reading like a chapter a day. The next time you can say, "Oh, I don't remember what we talked about last time. Can you tell me the gist of what we read last time?" Stuff like that. Without trying to ask leading questions, trying to pinpoint them down to a specific piece of information you're looking. Let them express organically what they remember. If a child can remember something and articulate it in their own words, they're able to own it. It's theirs. So that is one of the most important things that you can do, in my opinion. And I have a helpful book to share about that. Children who perform in plays, right? Either more advanced performances where you're like actually in a production on a stage, or if they just want to dress up and perform something for you. This is a wonderful way that they're telling stories and they're remembering things and they're using words to create. And eventually they start to learn to make records in writing of their own composition. And ultimately, the goal is for our children to be very eloquent and heartfelt, persuasive articulators of whatever words that they want so that they can reach people and have influence. But really, the higher level of grammar instruction and critical feedback comes a lot later in children's journey. In my experience with my children who are in the middle grades, focuses more on just being able to have fluency in writing compositions, not in getting them perfect. We do focus in the younger years in doing a lot of copywriting of excellent words and thoughts, so that they're used to writing things correctly. But in the middle grades, when they're just figuring out how to get their flow down, I found very quickly that it would be discouraging if they were hyper obsessed about how they spelled every single word. So I kind of stopped bothering too much with correcting things in my kids' middle grades. But now, as they're starting to get older, I'm like teaching more grammar rules and bringing more things to their awareness, because they're not hung up about being able to write a page or 5 pages of whatever it is that they want to write. Okay. So when you are looking at writing, this is something that's really important for you to know. You can see I have a picture here of hands of children, and at different developmental stages, you will see that children do not have all of the bones in their hands. Their hands are not fully developed. And so a lot of times we try to, because we're so excited, we want them to be able to write all of these things, and we know it's important, but we really push writing earlier than our children are ready. What they really need is to play in the dirt with sticks and mud. And they need to play with Play-Doh and learn how to pick things up with their little pincher grasps, and to develop fine motor skills in playing in whatever way that they think that that's important. They can play on play equipment that will strengthen their hands too, and it will be supportive to their brain development as well. So this is just a helpful thing to look at, to know that if your children's handwriting isn't the most beautiful, it makes sense, because their hands aren't prepared to do that. So don't push this too soon. But, one of the first things that I do seek to teach my children to write that they're excited about is their name. And so on handwritingpractice.net, I just print up a little print handwriting practice sheet with their name on it, and I laminate it and I give it to them with a dry erase marker so they can practice writing their name again and again, especially their first name. That's the very most important word to them. And so let them be able to write that. That will be exciting to them, and pretty young children are able to do that early on. A resource that I have found that I really love for teaching writing to children is the Draw Right Now series. And I love this one because it's a drawing course and a writing course. So they're increasing their capacity to be prepared for nature journaling a little bit later, but it's also just more fun. I did use the Zahner Blozer books. They have like kindergarten, first grade, and cursive sort of books with some of my older kids, but I found that the Draw Right Now was much more of a hit with my kids. And while it's not as detailed in the correction of the look of the letters per se, it did teach them how to be able to copyright accurately and to have a love of drawing. All of my kids are pretty decent drawers for their age, I think. And so that's a wonderful series. I highly recommend it. A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. If you do not have a poetry book, get that one. Gaio Fujikawa, she does the illustrations on this one. I think that Tasha Tudor also did a beautiful illustration of A Child's Garden of Verses. Find books of poetry with beautiful images with them and read them aloud to your children. Marlene Peterson's Well-Educated Heart, you can find that on librariesofhope.com. There's a series called The Book of Delights. I love to read those. They're great. They include a lot of beautiful poetry with gorgeous images, and my younger kids love to copyright those poems as well. You'll see here I have two books. Know and Tell, The Art of Narration by Karen Glass is a book that I wish I could hand. It's kind of like if I was invited to a baby shower, I'd have a gift that I want to give. Oh, I find somebody's homeschooling. Here's Know and Tell, The Art of Narration. This is a book I would love to give you. I love this book because it teaches why narration is the vehicle for articulate thinking and writing. It's really the beginning of it. So I highly recommend that you read that. It will change the way that you ask questions and interact with your children, and it will influence positively everything that you do with your children. Also, I really like Brenda Eulin's book, If You Want to Write. It's so, so delightful. It will inspire you to care more about writing. If you've got older kids, it would be great for them to be inspired and to know why their voice matters and why they should do that. You'll see I have a little picture of a notebook down below. I have a notebook where I record my thoughts about lectures that I attend or books that I read or important things that are happening in my life. And I try to make them beautiful with stickers and little drawings and to make it easy to read and look at. And that is a treasure for me. It is a record of the things that I'm learning. And the goal really is with writing and thinking is to be able to encourage our children to have records where they remember important things. Remember in the Book of Mormon, there's several instances where it's communicated that we write these records so our children can remember Christ. He is the one that we turn to. And there's spiritual things we can record, but there's other wonderful, important bits of information we can record. And I think that we should keep notebooks or records of the things that matter to us. If we do that, it will be more enticing for our children to do that. And I do keep a portfolio of the important work that my children are doing. And I think that that is motivating to them. It provides intrinsic motivation because they can see the important things that they're doing, that they're working on in one place. And because it's honored in their own space, they seek to do quality work because it's a reflection of them. So that's something you may want to consider. Now, reading is also in this same vein of writing, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources I've used to teach my children to read. But really the goal is to help our children to be able to comprehend higher level ideas, right? And if you've ever heard of the great books of the Western world, these are basically all of the books of Western civilization that constitute the great conversation. It's some of the best ideas that have been had by some of the greatest minds in the world. Can you read those? Can you understand them and talk about them and contribute something new to the great conversation? What has humanity understood through learning and study? And do we have something to contribute to that? And do we understand what great ideas have been had before? I would say that's kind of the pinnacle of the academic side in the reading realm. But really, the true goal as C.S. Lewis mentioned, is not just to understand all the classics and the greatest ideas, but it's to know Jesus, right? He is referred to as the Word. So obviously that's going to include reading scripture with our children a lot. And yes, read high quality, beautiful literature and living books that are not like textbooks that tell you what to think, but demonstrate things through beautiful symbol and reaching the heart. The relationship that you have with God and with scripture and with books cannot be underestimated. It will be a powerful influence in your children's lives. And I have some resources I'm going to share in the social studies section that demonstrate where you can find excellent books. But when you're teaching a young child to read, they really need to learn the letter sounds first. Letter names are not actually as important as the letter sounds. Yes, they will learn those, and that is important. But if a child who knows their letter sounds can read faster than the child who's struggling to process the letter names. So consider focusing on letter names and focusing more on the phonetics, especially for vowels. Children start by learning the short vowel sounds, a, e, first, before they go into more complex rules with long vowel sounds. So that's something to know. And you can teach your children a wonderful, sweet little poem that I found in the Ordinary Parent's Guide to Teaching Reading. And you teach it a letter at a time. And it's really easy. It's a great way for little kids to learn the phonetic application of letters and to start recognizing them in places. It goes something like, A is the first vowel we will say. A is the short vowel sound of A. E is the next vowel, don't you see? Eh is the short vowel sound of E. And then there's also a consonant poem, which is, B stands for B in bat. C stands for K in cat. Anyways, there's a little exercise that you can do each day with your children, or, one letter a week, however you want to do it. But you focus on one letter and you invite the child to go find that letter in all the different places around their home. So they're getting used to finding the letters. If you have children that are more kinesthetic learners, you can invite them to have the Montessori felt letters and play with those and touch those as you're doing that, and take those felt letters around as they're looking for the letters on, cans of food or boxes or the books, or even, on appliances. There's letters everywhere. So just helping children to get excited about letters and to associate them with sounds is really the first step of learning to read. As children learn their letter sounds and their names, then they're ready to have more complex letter combinations. Hooked on Phonics is great. Bob books are helpful, not necessarily beautiful to look at, but they're helpful. And they can start learning sight words also, and start memorizing those once they have gotten enough cognizance that they can handle more than one or two letters at a time. And then eventually children are able to start sounding out words and string them together. And the goal is for them to be able to read fluently in both print and cursive. I like the McGuffey readers. I like these because they do include cursive. And so I didn't have too many reading lessons in the McGuffies with my daughter in cursive before she was able to recognize cursive. And then she was motivated to learn how to write in cursive as well. So McGuffey readers are excellent for that. And the illustrations are beautiful. Definitely old school, but very helpful and beautiful. And you can see the quality of the thinking that goes into these McGuffey readers is very different than like the Bob books or the Hooked on Phonics, which are much more basic. But something to mention is that in European countries where they have some of the best education systems in the world, for example, in Finland, they don't even start any academic instruction with children until they're 7 years old. That's when they enroll them. So, and in the Bible, it talks about parents just having their children home until about that age, in the Jewish culture. That's what it says in the Bible dictionary under the education section. You can go read that. It's interesting. But I think we push academic learning and reading way too soon. In the Waldorf philosophy, they talk about children are not ready to read until they have started to lose their teeth and they've got their adult teeth coming in. That's a physical sign of readiness of reading. Also, if children are just actually interested and they want to learn. Young children should not be having extensive lectures or lessons, like 15 minutes tops. And for very young children, probably they can only handle a few minutes at a time. That's why we grow their ability to pay attention by reading really engaging stories with them. If they're engaged, it's working. If they're not engaged, don't push it. Your children will not be detrimentally affected by reading later. Children who learn to read later catch up eventually, and it's not a problem. So keep that in mind, please. The goal is to have children who love to learn to read, that they don't have traumatic experiences learning to read. So keep it fun, keep it light. This is the path towards teaching children how to read. Also, social studies. So social studies is really about appreciating the cultures that have come before and what have they offered to us and to the world. It's about finding a personal place of belonging and knowing how to influence what is already there towards good. So the lesson of history is that we should learn from the past, so we're not going to be doomed to repeat the terrible lessons that keep showing up again and again, right? And also to learn important stories and our place in them. When we're teaching social studies with young children, it really starts with reading fairy tales to them from different cultures and folk tales and fables. Those are basically the sort of subconscious archetypal stories of civilizations that teach children about what different cultures value. And by demonstrating art or dance or music or food of different world cultures, we can have a really fun exploration of forms. And it's wonderful for children to be able to experience and appreciate different forms that cultures offer. As children begin to get older and they get into the middle age, the middle ages, elementary ages to middle school ages, they start to get more interested in legends and origin stories. Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories comes to mind, right? And they love epic hero myths. They want to read all about the Greek gods and the Norse gods. Go get all of the Delaire's books, the Book of Myths, the Greek Book of Myths, or the Norse myths books. Those are excellent. But there are stories like that, origin stories and hero myths in every culture, and being able to include those in what you're learning with your family is key. Also, making sure that you have a really solid family government within your own home. Do your children know what is expected of them? Do they know what their role is as a child in relationship to you as a parent? Do they know that their role is to learn and your role is to teach, and that they should obey you, and that they also have a place where if they disagree, they can do so appropriately and negotiate things with you. Having a family government that is in good working order is an important part of teaching our children some of the most important lessons in the social studies realm. Okay. Now, as children get older, you notice I'm talking about, kind of imaginative tales that, are not untrue, but they're not based in fact, in the sense that like they have broader truth, but we as children get older, they start to become ready for historical information, for the lives that people led and what that meant. Now, a lot of times, especially in the public school setting, we try to teach history by having them memorize facts and dates and figures. And there's a place for memorization, but if you really want to reach children's hearts and have them care, teach history to them in the context of the stories of the lives of important people that are interesting. They will remember and cherish a lot more, and it will be meaningful to them. It will be motivating to learn more information and put stuff in a bigger context if they actually care about the stories that they're reading. So pick the stories that you share with your children carefully, and I have resources to help you with that. But yeah, we move from imaginative to concrete in social studies. And eventually we want our children to be able to participate within their constitutional republic, if you're an American, and probably a lot of people have constitutional republics these days, and also as engaged citizens in God's kingdom under God's laws. Do they understand what that means? That's a big deal, right? That's the ultimate social experiment of belonging. That's Zion. So how do we create that? Well, we learn through all of these different experiences, and it is a progressive learning experience. So I will show you some of the resources that I found that have been very helpful. I mentioned finding ways to have a solid family government in your own home. I think Nicolene Peck is an excellent resource for teaching core skills that your children need to learn, and how to come up with a family mission statement and a vision, and a family council, and doing meetings with your children, meeting with them one-on-one regularly to be able to help them do the things that they need to do and learn the things that they need to learn with respect to their agency. Parenting a House United, Changing Children's Hearts and Behaviors by Teaching Self-Government. I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the best parenting books that I've ever read for just getting your home established. Please read that. Now, I talked a little bit about, when children are in the younger years, you've got these little stories. If you see a My Book House set at a thrift store, like that looks like this, or is an even older one that's kind of like all the olive greens and teals, snag them. These are so good. The images in them are beautiful. The stories that they include are wonderful, and they're from around the world. A wonderful supplement to every homeschooler's library, and so good, especially for little kids. But as children get older, you want to have more resources. Now, I need you to know that if, I am a bit of a prepper, as many of you know, and so I care about, storing food and being prepared for difficult times. I believe that it is as important to store books that are high quality, that will reach our hearts, so that when we are in difficult situations, we will have access to beautiful resources that support us. Remember, during COVID, people were not able to go to the library. So are there resources that can help us? Yes, there are digital resources, but you could also get these physical resources. If somebody said, hey, Jamie, what are the books that you would have in your library for your children, so that at the end of the world, you knew you had books that were meaningful and good for them and that would be nourishing to their little souls? I'd say go onto librariesofhope.com and buy every single one of these books. This is the family library that I would recommend to you wholeheartedly, with everything in me, because I think that they are wonderful, wonderful resources. It's a wonderful collection. There was a golden age of children's literature, especially in the 1920s. And so a lot of these books are being discarded or destroyed by libraries. There's a lot of people who are active in the Reshelving Alexandria group on Facebook, for example. And also biblioguides, which I'm going to talk about. But people have done work to save some of these important books from the past that have been especially influential in sharing good ideas. So look at librariesofhope.com. It's the Well-Educated Heart right there, you can see. And get all those books for your family. And know that if you don't have the money to get those, that all of them can be read on a device. And so it's all free. You can have access to all of that information now. A wonderful, beautiful library with your children immediately. So check that out. Also, BiblioGuides is a wonderful resource. And I think the subscription is like $6 a month. It's for $75 for a year. It's like the best library that you could ever imagine, with only good books in it. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's content that you'd want to check and be careful about, but I love BiblioGuides because I get to bypass a lot of the junk that my kids might be interested in at the library, and it's just higher quality choices there. So this is a compendium of the best books in the world, and you could buy books. There are links often to Amazon or to other locations where you can buy books. By the way, you can look up booksprice.com. Is a wonderful place to find used books, and it's a search engine that compares different sites so you can find the cheapest price. But you'll start to develop a sense of which books are worth having, and you can print a wish list, and you can kind of take that with you if you're going to thrift stores and stuff like that. But a lot of these books are archived online, and so you can go to Internet Archive and download the books, and then your children can read wonderful books for free from home, and know that they're high quality, good literature. The quality of the literature we feed our children's little minds and hearts is of utmost importance. Just like we wouldn't feed them Twinkies for every meal, we shouldn't be feeding them mind trash. And I say that as lovingly as I can. Okay. You can see here on the side, I've got like a little schedule for the year with a bunch of subjects written under them. It's small, but you can find this on the Well Educated Heart site, which is librariesofhope.com. Under their rotation tab, they have a suggested rotation for each month where you can basically take a trip around the world and focus on different subjects. And it's just an easy way to break up all that there is to know. And will we ever get to the bottom of all that there is to know? No. But by putting things in the context of subjects, we can make learning fresh for our children. I use this rotation in my home, and I pull out the books from our library that are relevant to those subjects that month. And my other kids who can read independently, I encourage them to read 30 minutes a day from any of the books on this subject from our little book carousel. And they can also go on BiblioGuides and find books within those subject themes for the month. So they're picking things, but it's also still curated. Something to know about here is when your kids get into the middle grades, and I talked about them finding their place in your family and in the world, and they're exploring epic hero myths and things like that. A wonderful way to have them participate is through an entrepreneur fair for children. So I started an educational commonwealth with a lot of ladies in my area, and now we have like 21 families who participate. Some people drive an hour to come to our commonwealth. They love it so much. And we have a children's entrepreneur fair. And we partnered with a local nonprofit to help promote it, but we have also partnered with Acton Children's Business Fair, and they do grants for people who want to host children's business fairs. And so Acton's great. Partner with them, or find out if somebody is already hosting a children's entrepreneur fair in your area, and be connected to that so that you can support your children in this. I have found it is a wonderful way for children to own what is theirs and their contribution, and they get so excited. I'm really impressed by the quality of the things that the kids are selling and the creativity of their ideas. It's getting richer and richer every year because it's like a stable implement in our year. It's like, yep, come fall, we're having a kid entrepreneur fair, and these kids are so excited about it. And they work on preparing things all year and developing their skills. It's such a great way to change kids' lives for the better, and for them to be thinking about what contribution they can make in a way that is exciting to them. I was really motivated to do this because of some of the things in Connor Boyak's books, The Tuttle Twins. I will post an affiliate link for those below. I have been recommending the Tuttle Twins books for years. I think it teaches principles of liberty that are vital to our society. Like, we need to understand some fundamental ideas about the market economy and how to treat each other, and things happening not by coercion, right? I also have some more thoughts about God's economy and how that works, and I think it's beyond money in many ways. But I think these ideas are important, and I love the kinds of conversations that I'm able to have with my children that are quite intelligent, because of what the Tuttle Twins series has done for us. We like to watch the Tuttle Twins cartoons too. They're a little rude, honestly, and not the most beautiful, but their goal is to reach kids in the same way that most other cartoons are reaching kids, but with higher quality ideas. So, and so there's a little bit of sass to them, but we laugh about it. We love it. We love the Tuttle Twins. We are Tuttle Twins people around here. So I recommend those books and those resources to you to consider and see if that would be helpful for your family. I think it's helping my kids know how they can participate as active, engaged citizens in a free world and in a constitutional republic. You'll see here on the left, I have a picture of my son and my daughter. Yes, instead of giving them bouquets, I gave them house plants. They participated in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and they did such a great job, and they really came alive, and they loved Shakespeare. They did that because they participated in a transition to scholar class. So what do I mean by transition to scholar? So one of the philosophies that we utilize in our education commonwealth is leadership education, or Thomas Jefferson education approach. And there are some fundamental phases of learning. There's a core phase, a love of learning phase, and a scholar phase. And there's also a mission phase, depth phase. There's other phases too, but these are the main phases for children. And so we have kids that are kind of on the cusp of love of learning into scholar phase, which is kind of more like, 13, 14 and up. And so we utilize Lemmy. You can see down in the bottom right-hand corner, they're associated with Thomas Jefferson education. And they have scholar classes for kids. Like, how do you teach high school to kids who, without sending them back to the public school system? Can we do this without coercion? The answer is yes, we can. And I think Lemmy is, in a big way, a solution to a lot of those problems. They have wonderful offerings. They have a class called Shakespeare Conquest. And that's what we did with our kids, but we modified it slightly so that it could reach a little bit of a younger audience. But they still, like my daughter, she's 10, she read 17 Shakespeare plays, full-length Shakespeare plays. My son read 17 modified versions and probably like 5 full-length ones, or watched or listened to them. My kids already have a better understanding of Shakespeare than I did, and it's because of the Shakespeare Conquest class through Lemmy, which is excellent. And they provide training every year in the different courses they teach. So there's Shakespeare Conquest. There is Key of Liberty. That's one we're going to be doing in our Commonwealth this year. It's a class all about the American Revolution and the Constitution and our place in the American Revolution. And so that one's awesome. We also have a class called Quest. That's one that I'm going to be mentoring to the older children this year. It's basically a collegiate level writing and speaking course where we study the lives of great figures in history and what they wrote or what they spoke and the way that it influenced the world. And we start to find ways that we can participate by developing traits of statesmen and stateswomen in ourselves and be more influential. Super cool class. And Lemmy also has another class. This is related to holistic math and science, called Pyramid. And they just have lots of offerings. You'll want to check into that. And they have Georgic's class. There's just, Lemmy is great. And so Lemmy was also very helpful in giving training that helped us to get our educational commonwealth founded. So I recommend them as a helpful resource in especially building up your community, right? If social studies is about finding our place in the world, part of what we do as parents is to build a community of support networks for our children, because we can't actually do all of the educating ourselves. We do need people to work with, to help us in teaching our children, and mentors who care, who have valuable knowledge to share. So let's be careful about the people that we choose to invite into our children's lives and do it in a context of people who have similar values about the way that we approach educating our children. I think that's the goal in the future, is to have communities that support each other in educating our own. Now, science, what's the point of science? The point of science is to have a sense of wonder for life, and to want to cherish it and honor it and to cultivate it. So the earliest exposure to science is basically show and tell and nature walks, okay? Go spend time out in nature, learn to enjoy it with your kids, go on hikes, go on nature walks. And when they show you a cool bug or a plant or something, take time to look at that and look for the interesting things too, and spend time enjoying nature together. That cannot be underestimated. The sights and the sounds and the colors that will reach your children's hearts. Now, when children have a sense of wonder about the world, they then start to want to observe and record it. And that's part of being a scientist too. Are you seeing what you're seeing accurately? So nature journaling is often the vehicle towards greater articulation of what they're seeing and record keeping. And we also want our children to start to understand what has been studied before and who did that and what were their life stories. And eventually we want our children to be able to ask questions of their own and experiment with pushing the frontier of knowledge by asking questions that haven't been answered yet. That's the goal and overall trajectory of science. So what are some resources that I found in my home to do that? Well, you can see a picture here on the left of inspiring a sense of wonder in my children by taking them to the Jedediah State Smith Park in Crescent City, California, and walking amongst the redwoods is so inspiring. My tiny little daughter compared to this tree, wow. Spend time loving nature and experiencing it. I love the Laws Field Guide to the Sierra Nevada by John Muir Laws. It's especially relevant to the area where I live, but if it's not relevant to you, you might like the National Audubon Society books. I have almost all of these, I believe, and they're really great field guides to being able to find and identify the things that you're seeing out in nature. John Muir Laws also wrote a book on nature journaling that can be a wonderful introduction to the subject so that you can help your children know how to observe what they're seeing out in nature and start to be a scientist by observing the natural world. You can see this beautiful parakeet my daughter drew. This is an illustration of her pet bird, Lilac. She did not trace this. She drew it herself. And this is because we spend time nature journaling. She can observe things accurately and carefully. Anytime I find something by Audubon, and I've actually invested quite a bit of money in buying books that are high quality prints of James Audubon. His artwork of nature, of natural subjects is just gorgeous and very inspiring. So I definitely have those as part of our collection of books. I have a whole bunch of textbooks that are very helpful. I like to find ones that have beautiful pictures. You know, you can always find those around. Those are a dime a dozen. And I use scientific textbooks at times to help facilitate my children's education with these task cards. Creek Edge Press has task cards on every subject, but I especially like these for science because I want them to be able to cover the body of knowledge that has already been articulated, generally speaking, in the scientific realm. So there's subjects like life sciences and earth and space science and physics and chemistry and great scientists. And there's basically a card that's essentially a unit study where you research the subject and you define things, and they have project assignments like make a booklet or a pamphlet or a poster or make a model, that kind of a thing. So I love these task cards as a way to allow my children the freedom to do work that is their own. It's self-guided and self-directed. The goal is for them to do quality work according to their level of interest and ability. It's nice because these can be modified for any child on the spectrum of age. Like this could provide a collegiate level education if somebody really wanted to go deep into answering these questions thoroughly for themselves. So I just keep a record. I print a PDF for each of my kids of all the science task cards, and I keep it in their portfolio, and then they're able to check off the ones they've completed and date them. And if they have, you know, especially good work that they put together, they can keep that inside their portfolio as well. But I usually have my children privilege the books that we have in our library before they go on the internet to research things, so that my children know how to use an index. They know how to research and look up information and find answers to questions that they have. And a lot of times if my kids have scientific questions now about different subjects, and they're like, I wonder about this. Do you know about that, Mom? And a lot of times they don't know the answer. So I'll say, I wonder if you could find out the answer. And so then they do. They know how to research that. It's pretty cool. I asked my kids, what's your favorite experiment book? Because we have a stack of those too. You know, people have like pre-made experiments that you can do to play around with science. And this was the one that my kids liked the best, is 365 Simple Science Experiments with Everyday Materials. Super easy and kind of grab and go for the kids. They can do a lot of that themselves. So I love things where my kids can be more independent and they do the work. My goal as a homeschooler is not to give them pre-digested information where I'm just trying to get them to produce responses, but I really want them engaged with the work that they're doing. So resources like these help me to do that. I also have a book down here called Gaia's Garden. If you're interested in having your own permaculture wonderland, This is a way that you could learn about that. Toby Hemingway's an excellent writer and a passionate mentor of permaculture. And I especially love this book, but I shared this because it has been a way that my son has gotten into experimenting. So my son's very into science. He loves carnivorous plants. He loves planted aquariums. He loves permaculture. He loves all little creatures and living things. He's got terrariums that he builds and he knows how to cycle them properly. He's got a pet toad, a frog, a praying mantis, a shrimp tank with different colored shrimp that he's breeding. He's got like fish and all kinds of creatures all the time. He's got ants, like he's got a queen ant right now in a test tube who's laying eggs. She's up to 3 eggs this morning. We saw. Anyways, he loves creatures. He loves observing little things. And by the way, we have an excellent family microscope. If you do not have a great family microscope, that's one you definitely want to have. Don't get like a cheapy one meant for kids. Invest in a higher quality microscope. You can get them on eBay or Craigslist or something like that. Get a nice microscope for your family. It will be a wonderful investment for inspiring observation. But these books here, Gaia's Garden, is one of many books that I have given to my son over the years. They're books that are written by passionate mentors on subjects that he cares about. Peter D'Amato, if you're listening, you've written wonderful books. The Savage Garden on carnivorous plants. My son admires you so much. And he has learned so much from you. This is a way that you can inspire your children to care about things that matter in the scientific realm, is by giving them books by passionate mentors, usually a single author, maybe 2 authors who've written books because they care about them. So figure out the things that your kids are interested in and hand over the books, because project-based learning is science, okay? We're building skills and awareness. There's scientific literacy and stuff like that. Creek Edge Press task cards will help with some of that. Another resource for building scientific literacy, I'm moving on now, is to the Well-Educated Heart Academy. This is a new resource. They just started this year. I am going to be enrolling my kids in this probably in the next year or 2, especially my oldest son. He's 12, so he's got a little time. But you do need to pay for the year. It's an enrollment type of situation, but they teach these scientific subjects and many other subjects. I think there's Spanish and biology and anatomy and physiology and physics, and there's a bunch of, in a composition class, there's a bunch of classes, and they're basically online, but they're with mentors who are very passionate and teach things in a heart-led way. So you can help your children to learn the information, but in a way that sinks deeply into their souls and that is supportive to them. I think this is the future of education, is being able to be taught by mentors who sincerely care. So those are some resources that I have found to be helpful with science. Now, math. What's the purpose of math? It's really about learning the relationship between all things and the laws that govern value. But math is ultimately more abstract, right? There's a lot of concepts in math that you can't necessarily see, and that's where we want to lead our children. But we learn that first through understanding physical application of numbers. So children learn that through cooking and organizing and sorting physical items. They learn it by putting things in a sequence and counting, right? If there are board games that they can play that teach rules, and I take my turn and I count these number of spaces, these are all ways that little children can learn math. Eventually, we want them to be able to memorize basic math facts and increase their fluency in handling numbers. And then even further than that, we want them to be able to handle numbers in more complex ways through, algebra and geometry and trigonometry and calculus, etc. Really, why do we want them to do that? We want them to be able to score well on college entrance exams. And to be honest, college entrance exams, your child can go to college whether they're an excellent test taker or not. Everybody can go to college. There are plenty of colleges that accept people 100% acceptance rate. They just want your money. Just so you know, maybe I should make a whole video just about the college issue in homeschooling and how to be prepared for that and what the data says about homeschoolers in college. I'll be out in just a minute. I'm almost done. Okay. But the ultimate goal is, beyond scoring well on college entrance exams to look like you care about math. And to be able to have some of the basic understanding of math. Man, there's a great TED talk about this guy talking about how he's a math teacher and that nobody uses math and nobody cares about math. And that's kind of how I feel about math, but there are greater purposes for math. And like I said, I'm outlining those here, but usually in the context of academic education, the reason that we want our children to learn about math is so they can score well on exams. That's the only reason. So what are some of the things that I use to encourage my children to do the hard work of learning about math? Well, when my kids are young, I use either Montessori math manipulatives. I love these because they're often more natural materials that they use, and they're so beautiful. Montessori have just like the best learning materials, I swear, but they're so expensive. So we can also do the plastic stuff from Saxon. And those are also very helpful. I've taught a lot of lessons with these little plasticky parts, and that's okay, and everybody survives. But you could simply take a handful of spoons out of your jar or out of your drawer and have your kid count them, or get their little assortment of toys and tell a story about going to the park, and 3 went into the park to play and 2 came back, and how many are left. I mean, little story word games like that can do a lot for children. And you can sing songs. Like we've got a few songs that I teach my children about time: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And I just sing that to my little kids over and over again. I've also got a Days of the Week with the Addams Family tune. There's Sunday and there's Monday, there's Tuesday and there's Wednesday, there's Thursday and there's Friday, and then there's Saturday. Days of the week, days of the week, days of the week, days of the week, days of the week. We've got a 10 song: 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Okay, don't you love my singing? Isn't it fabulous? So there are songs you can sing with your kids that can help them memorize things. There are lots of resources for memorizing math facts. Use those because it's boring knowledge, but it's helpful to just have it handy. But really, games, cooking, these are ways that you really can reach your younger children and that they will learn a lot of math actually through those experiences. I love living math books like the Circumference series. Oh my goodness, there's several of these that teach a lot of math concepts in a really fun, sweet way. That's a living book example of math, an approach to math. And the Life of Fred series is also excellent. My kids love those. They think it is so funny and it's hilarious. Super corny and weird and super fun. Also, the Magical Math book is one that I really love. My older kids are great at teaching the younger kids. Oftentimes I'll have them teach a lesson to the younger kids through a math game. So I say, go get Magical Math and do a game with your little siblings. This one's super fun. We have done a lot of Saxon math over the years. It's very incremental. Kids can do it on their own. It's a few pages of worksheets. That's something they can do. Also, I love pixel math worksheets where the kids can do math fact practice through drawing a picture. They have like a little math problem inside a square and they have to be able to color it the right color so they have to get the right answer. Otherwise their picture doesn't work. So that's another way. Like pixel math worksheets is a helpful one that I've used to help my kids remember their math facts. But we've moved on to teaching textbooks. We're trying that this year and my kids are enjoying it a lot. And it's based in teaching like geometry, for example. The questions are structured the same way as they are in the college entrance exams. And they're able to do it on their own and manage that themselves. And so I appreciate things that make my life easier. So teachingtextbooks.com is one that's helping me do that this year. Also, I have the book, A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. If you want to have a greater appreciation for numbers and how they fit into the grand scheme of things, this is a great book for you. And on a simpler level, when my daughter was getting frustrated with math and just thinking it was boring and she didn't see how it mattered, which is understandable. I mean, honestly, what do we really need beyond some basic algebra? Maybe an understanding of statistics well enough to know how people are lying with numbers. I know how to cook. I know how to do a budget on an Excel spreadsheet. I know a little bit about interest rates and a balloon mortgage versus like a ballooning loan versus what's the other loan? Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting it. Anyways, different types of loans, things like that. That's practical, helpful knowledge. But if you want to appreciate numbers on a greater level, this book is an excellent one. Now, my daughter, when she was not appreciating numbers in the same way, I have another book that I didn't picture here, but I think is very helpful. It's called The Book of Mandalas. And it basically takes some of these advanced concepts and Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, but it puts them in the context of nature, with the most gorgeous images of mandalas in nature. And so you can understand what 1 looks like, or 2 looks like, or 3 or 4 or 5. And you start to see the shapes that repeat in nature everywhere else. And so that can help make math holistic for them and help them to see numbers in other places and appreciate it beyond just the rote memorization of, we got to get this stuff down, and obviously music is a way that we can appreciate math. If your children are open to learning about musical instruments, something that we do in our home, the Well-Educated Heart series, they have what is it called? An appreciation series or something. There's a book called Symphony Stories, and I start the day off with my kids. We say a prayer together, and we usually start with a Symphony Stories reading, and I let them pick which one of these you want to read today, and we open it up and we read the story about an important piece of music, and then we listen to it and we see what we can learn and feel through listening to beautiful music. So music is obviously a way that children can appreciate math. Knitting is a way that children can learn to have cross-brain connection, and they learn to do things very exactly. And stuff like that. Handicrafts can be other ways that they can appreciate equations of value. Like, if you want to get this outcome, then you need to do these things. There's a relationship here. The equal sign is all about figuring out relationships between things. So those are some helpful resources for math for you. Again, I just want to take this back to the point that I made in the beginning, is that there are things that really matter more than the academic stuff. And the academic stuff can be fuel to the fire for learning the most important things. What is our relationship with God? Do we appreciate Scripture and all of the things that it's teaching us? Do we have a sense of awe and wonder and appreciation for God, who has made this beautiful earth for us? Are we able to be self-sufficient and free and working together in our families? Do our kids love each other? Do we love each other and serve each other? These are some of the most important lessons. And not only do we serve our families, but do we go out and serve the greater community so that there are no more poor among us? How can we elevate the lives of all of God's children? That's really what an education is about. And it's about helping us to know God together. So if you would like more help on this, I have recorded a 9-hour course with my friends Nancy Jones and Mikkel Shea called Patterns of Zion in Home Education. We're all home educating mothers of many, many children between us. And we talk about things in the context of the gospel with lots of scriptural support. We talk about, what does a Babylon education look like? What does a Zion education look like? By the way, if you want to know what a Babylon education looks like, or if you really want to wake up to what the public compulsory education system is, I recommend that you read something or listen to a YouTube video by John Taylor Gatto. He was a public school teacher in New York for 30 years. And the things that he shares about what he really was teaching the children during that time is a little bit heartbreaking and very eye-opening. I love to recommend John Taylor Gatto's work to helping people open their eyes to the Babylonian education system and why it's so important to do something different. So what does a Zion education look like? That's what this course is about. And we draw from all of the philosophies that we have found regarding education, but we put them into a holistic explanation. We really love Well-Educated Heart. but we also love Thomas Jefferson education or leadership education. We love classical education. We love Charlotte Mason. We love unschooling. We love Montessori. We love Waldorf. And there's important elements of all of these that we think are worthily incorporated into a Zion education. And we share exactly why all of these philosophies matter. And we put them in the context of chakras, like energy centers. How do you educate the full body of a child and a person and a community and a society, right? If we're told that the rainbow is going to be a fulfillment of God's covenant and remembering the promises to the fathers, is like, how do we take all of this body of knowledge across time and all the things that matter? Well, it's written in our bodies and the way that we take care of our children. Okay. And so this is our idea, this idea of the chakras and the different educational approaches. And so don't be stealing my idea, people. I wouldn't say it's just my idea. It was something that came to us through inspiration, and it's really God's idea. But a lot of times you'll see in the homeschooling community that people try to argue for their philosophy. And when I used to talk to new homeschoolers, I would often ask them questions to try to figure out which direction to put, to send them resources, because people would ask me about curriculum. And I'd say, oh, well, it depends on your philosophy. Let me know your philosophy, and then I'll know where to send you. But the truth is, most homeschoolers are pretty eclectic. And so Patterns of Zion and Home Education isn't about pushing one philosophy. It's about appreciating all of the good philosophies about education, but putting them in the context of a gospel setting and asking questions that help you to reflect on the way that you're educating your children and what you're including intentionally, so that you can have an approach with your children that is unique and personalized for you and for your children, and that is educating them in a holistic way. So if that sounds of interest to you, I'm going to put a link to that course below, and you can access it there. We offer it at different price points because we know that that everybody has different financial circumstances. Let's get clear on the truest aims that you have for your children's education. I hope this presentation was very helpful to you, and I hope you have a wonderful year connecting with your kids and helping them to grow and progress in the most important ways. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe below, and I will have more wonderful presentations for you in the future. Thank you for your time. Bye.